The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Frankly Speaking. I'm, of course, your host today, Frank Saberic. And in the great words of that great game show host, Steve Harvey, I got another good one for you today. Today we have two guests representing an organization. I take it they're like an advocacy group dealing with addictions. Which addictions, I'll ask you like right off the bat, but the name of your organization is called Good Samaritan Network. You don't have a headquarters yet per se, but Dick Kiernan is the executive director, and you live in Bedford.
And our office is out of there.
And your office is out, but you don't really have a headquarters per se, but no. That should be coming in the next couple of years, maybe. Maybe soon, next couple of months. I don't know.
Dick's headquarters at 9 Bedford Street are doing just fine, right?
Okay. Well, you save a lot of money that way, I'm sure.
Yeah, I like it, the convenience of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so Dick, I'll start off with you. You're the executive director of Good Samaritan Network. Tell us exactly what that entails. How did you get involved with Good Samaritan Network? And maybe, one of you two will need to talk about addictions. What kind of addictions are you involved with your organization?
Okay. Well, so I started off as a teacher for 7 years. And then I've been involved in ministry now for 30 years. And I've been doing a number of things such as Alpha New England. If you've heard of the Alpha course, it invites people to know Jesus through this course. Very popular, it was gone around the world. But a few years ago, I desired to have my last ministry in New Hampshire. And since I had been coordinating the New Hampshire Alliance part-time for several years, it became my full-time work, especially when the governor asked for help with the addiction crisis. So all of a sudden, we have ramped up in the last 2 years. So it's changed quite a bit. So I'm the executive director over a staff of 4 others that are part-time. We have a communications director. We have an administrator. We have a regional director in the 93 South Salem Dairy area. And we also have a development director. So I'm the executive director overseeing our mission to carry out the New Hampshire Alliance, which has a ministry called the Good Samaritan Network, which is under it. Okay.
And I can have my second guest here, also with the Good Samaritan Network, Joe Johnsick. You're the chairman of the Good Samaritan Network Advisory Board. So the same thing, what exactly does a chairman of the advisory board do? How did you get involved in that? And I'll ask you, what kind of addictions specifically does your organizations deal with?
All right, well, let me, thank you, Frank. Let me, first of all, give you a little bit of my background. I was born and raised in the Midwest in the great state of Michigan. And I became very involved with a very large retail company. I was blessed to spend 35 years with them in various management positions. The name of the company is the J.C. Penney Company. And I started in my hometown of Port Huron, Michigan. And I moved up from store to district to region to corporate level. So I've been blessed with many different experiences in the retail field. I traveled all over the country, and I was very involved in my time with community agencies, if you will, United Way, Chamber of Commerce, various things like that. I specifically came up here and met Dick through my son, Joe Johnsick, Pastor Joe Johnsick, who's the senior pastor at Goffstown Harvest Christian Church in Goffstown. He had been asking me as his father to come up and help him with the church for several years. My grandchildren and great-grandchildren are here, so I did come up to be closer to them. And I wasn't here but 2 weeks, and as Dick alluded to earlier, the government, the Sununu government had called a meeting with the faith-based community and just asked us the question, followed with, we don't know what to do with this opioid crisis. We can't arrest our way through it. How can the faith-based community help us? And that was the starting point for mine and Dick's relationship. And the Good Samaritan Network came from that question from the government. Now I'm sorry.
Oh, addictions.
Yes, well, as we had mentioned to you earlier, the first focus was on the opioid crisis because that's how the government brought us on board. But what we found out was as a community, as a Christian community, we really didn't have any knowledge of what we had available in our communities when the government asked us that question. So under the guidance of Dick here and several pastors and several meetings that we had, the first assignment we had was, let's find out who and what's out there, particularly those Christian ministries. And I think at this point, I'll let Dick, if you don't mind, to kind of jump in because he can put some meat onto the bone.
Well, Frank, the alcohol and drugs are the main addictions that we're focused on. But because we're Christ-centered, Christian discipleship is freedom from all addictions. So one of our key partners is Celebrate Recovery, and they have all kinds of things to help people get out of hurts, habits, and hang-ups, they say. And so it really does go to many other things in the process of discipleship. But the real starting point is alcohol and drugs. That's the main crisis in New Hampshire that we responded to with the governor.
Okay. Well, I noticed too, I think it was Joe here that mentions a lot of Teen Challenge. And I know Teen Challenge I think that's like solely like alcohol and like a boot camp for like mostly like young people and 20-somethings.
No, not really. It's the name is misleading. Actually, they take anyone at any age. My son went through that program, by the way, which we can get into later. But Teen Challenge is open at any age. It can be from, 15 years old to 70 years old, men and women. So it isn't just for teens. And they are predominantly, it's a volunteer basis, and you go into the program anywhere for a year to 15 months. And it is true that they're focused primarily on those that have issues with alcohol and or drugs. And so that's what they focus on.
Okay.
And they're part of the Good Samaritan Network, which we'll get into. As you say, we're kind of look at us as I don't know if Dick likes it when I use this word, but as a funnel of information. The Good Samaritan Network was to set up, number one, our first assignment was let's find out what's out there, particularly of the Christian help ministries that are out there. And then we're going to collaborate with secular and so on and so on. And Dick can, again, jump in and add some real meat to it.
Okay. Well, I knew of an individual who was going through court, I think a DWI, a young person who was 20-something. And I guess the lawyer made a deal with the judge or the court saying, if he can go through this Teen Challenge program, can he do this in lieu of jail? And the judge agreed, or the jury agreed, however they work it. And he did that as his sentence, so to speak, as in lieu of going to jail, which there'd probably be no rehab in jail. You just...
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, that whole, the drug and the judicial court for drugs actually started in the state of Florida. Now, I mentioned earlier, I retired down in Florida. I was there for 18 years. And I became very involved in a prison ministry, family integrity training, which again is a ministry that's part of the Good Samaritan Network. We have these various ministries. But anyway, down in Florida, they decided that they made a state law that the inmate had to go through 100 hours of teaching on life skills before they could even get out of prison. And family integrity training, which again is part of Good Samaritan Network, was the first faith-based ministry chosen to go into the prisons down there and be part of the 100-hour program. Now, simply stated, and then I'll stop here, I'm the facilitator that brought family integrity training up into the New England states. I'm a facilitator for that program. It started in Florida, but we're in several states, even in the country of Mexico right now.
Oh, okay. Okay. So basically, as far as like addictions go for like eating disorders, the food addictions, I guess, cigarettes, the pornography, video games, stuff like that, that's another bucket of worms. Probably some other organizations.
Celebrate Recovery, one of our partner ministries, takes on a whole variety of addictions. And so they definitely take on sexual addiction. They take on codependency when you have a loved one who's in an addiction, to help you out in that. So they have, a number of other addictions they focus on. But a number of them, like there's one in Concord where it's basic discipleship. So all kinds of addictions are things that people work on. So it can be, we're primarily focused on alcohol and drugs, but many other things are addressed within the programs.
Okay, so your website mentions that your Good Samaritan Network is an outreach ministry of the New Hampshire Alliance. What exactly is the New Hampshire Alliance?
So the New Hampshire Alliance came about through what I call the prayer movement. Nearly 30 years ago, there was actually a crusade in Manchester, and at that crusade, about 100 churches participated. And coming out of that, many of the pastors said we should be coming together. So a prayer effort was started there in the early 90s. Other things we did were like Marches for Jesus, Promise Keepers movement. There were different things that came along that we said we should be doing these things. And eventually we incorporated and we developed our vision around John 17, where Jesus prayed, may they be brought to complete unity so the world may know. So we said, well, we have so many different churches, but Jesus prayed for us to be united. So we want to come together in unity and in prayer. And that has led to a number of things. Pastors and fellowship all across the state, nights of worship in local regions, but then the whole state coming together. So we've had a number of nights of worship, prayer networking, National Day of Prayer, and then this outreach element of it. So we bring together a whole number of ministries, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and Rick Cardo's in the Nathan Project for sexual addiction. I mean, we have about 20 ministries coming together next Tuesday to share so that we can bring them to these regions. And so Good Samaritan Network became one of those that we're bringing to the 10 regions of New Hampshire.
I see. I would assume in this past calendar year, this had to be a very, very tough calendar year for you guys. The COVID, you had to live in quarantine. You had to put on the stupid COVID mask, socially distance from each other. Yes. You can't go to church. You can't attend church services. Let's see. What if a person passes away, you can't go to their wake or funeral. I would assume the addictions to drugs and alcohol would have really been spiked up in the past, February, March? How long has this pandemic been in effect?
Yeah, beginning in March. Yeah, you want to address that, Joe?
Sure. Well, I don't know as if there's been some actual scientific studies on it, but it's true. Think of human nature. When we're isolated, we tend to go to our weaknesses. We tend to go to whatever that is in our life that we tend to fall down on. If you're isolated and alcohol tends to be a temptation, you tend to drink a little more. That just seems to set inside of us. We had a conversation, you and I, earlier, and I said, do you ever have to teach the child to steal the cookie? And the answer is no. So we inherently tend to go to those things that we're narcissistic about. But it has gone up somewhat because of the COVID virus. I mean, that's the short answer to it. Many things have gone up. They've talked about anger issues, domestic violence has gone up, alcoholism has gone up, suicide rate has gone up. Dick and I were just speaking about that earlier. So we have that, but on the other side, there was an opportunity, and I know of many families that became closer together because the children couldn't go to school. So now there's the good side that comes out, right? So that's the Christian side of it. So the parents were able to spend more time with their children. So that's a very good thing. I always like to say, as the God of this world closes door, the God of heaven causes doors to become open. And through that, look at technology, how it's growing. I know in our church, we were pretty sophisticated technology-wise, but when we weren't able to go into church, we had everything set up, a studio, if you will, that we could have church online. But there was a lot of churches that were struggling with that, so they had to put that in place. So that's it's a new avenue to communicate to your flock, if you will. Dick, did you want to add anything?
Amazing.
And I'm sure I've forgotten something.
Yeah, I would like to say our Good Samaritan Network focus has been from 3 years ago, almost coming up in October when the governor first invited us. We've identified 58 recovery ministries, Christian Christ-centered recovery ministries all over the state, and we've invited 108 churches. That was our early last February to respond. And our 2020 goal, once we get the church and these recovery ministries in the picture, was to connect to all the community agencies so that Christ-centered recovery could be available. And the only problem is that connection is not the main idea of 2020. So that caused a real monkey wrench for us to be able to carry out the connection. We had about 10 ways we had identified. For example, in Nashua, the drug court. So the drug courts around New Hampshire became one of our areas that we wanted to connect with and offer what we have. But that's been blocked, But what we have had to do is, like everybody, go move our things online. So we put together a Good Samaritan Network church leaders training. It became an online thing. We brought the speakers together. We put the training together in a concise amount of time. And now we plan to do it live as soon as things open up. So we've been going online and finding other ways to carry out our mission. It's harder, but our mission has to go on.
That makes sense. So, okay, so moving right along, 4 years ago, God, we're like 42 days away from voting for the president. But 4 years ago, one of Donald Trump's big thing about visiting New Hampshire was all the voters telling him about the opioid crisis. For some reason, I guess, I don't know if it was worse in New Hampshire than the other 49 states or whatever, which doesn't quite make sense. But since he's been building his wall between the United States and Mexico, has the opioid crisis in New Hampshire gotten worse, better, or about the same?
Well, I think let's dissect that question if we might, Frank. Number one, yes, per capita, the New England states were very high in opioid use. Per capita, very high. Now let's talk about part of the reason for that. It's easy to get drugs in. If you look at our borders to Canada, all the different ways that you can come in, that's a situation. The different small communities that we have and so on and so forth. So that's what was happening up here. Now, I must say, before President Trump came in, that George W. Bush actually started the federal government being involved in the opioid crisis. And that's where we can come in with Teen Challenge, because when he was the governor of Texas, Teen Challenge was having results, and they wanted to be part of getting perhaps some financial help from the state government back then. And of course, the other ministries came up that were secular and says, no, we can't do that. And George W. Bush said, we have to hold Teen Challenge to the same criteria as our secular. This is unfair. So that kind of started it. He was a vessel of the Lord, I would say, to get started on that level, to start opening the doors to faith-based ministries to help our fellow man. Donald Trump followed through with that as he came up here. Governor Sununu has followed through with that. We met with Governor Sununu. He's very aware of the Good Samaritan Network. And I would say, at this point, he wrote a letter. He's very supportive. And for the first time, and I hope I'm not getting ahead of ourselves here, Dick, but we're excited. For the first time on the Drug and Alcohol Bureau, we have Kathy Sari, who's part of the Good Samaritan Network. She has Gateway Ministries out of Jaffrey, New Hampshire. She's on that Why do I keep forgetting the call of it?
Drug and
Yeah, the
alcohol.
Drug and alcohol.
Alcohol and
Committee.
other drugs.
Yes,
co-
committee, if you will, or
Commission.
yeah, commission.
Governor's
That's it. Thank you,
Commission.
Dick. That's what I was. So we're excited about that. In other words, as the devil again has caused things to happen, God of heaven is putting things in place, and the government is opening their eyes to the fact that the faith-based community has excellent results that sometimes the seculars just can't compare to. And now we could segue into why is that?
But could I add
Yes.
to, we had found that a New York Times article was written about this. And yes, in 2016 and 2017, for a period of time, Manchester became the highest per capita death in the country, rivaling in the Appalachia around the Ohio Valley. There was a couple other places that had just as severe as problem, but we were the worst for a period of time. And the New York Times article said that Joe hit on number one, the availability of drugs, not just from Canada, but through points through Massachusetts, there were routes coming up. A second one was that there was doctors prescribing twice the national average here for pain medication. So that was one that was really interesting. A third one was there was a lack of recovery resources in New Hampshire. One of our friends in the White Mountain Recovery up in the North Country was from Massachusetts. He said you could throw a rock anywhere in Massachusetts and hit a recovery place. There's so many of them. They're all over the place. But in New Hampshire, we don't have many. We didn't have many. And finally, the receptivity of people to it. In Manchester, I think because many people gravitate towards Manchester in the state, there's a higher number of homeless there. And Mayor Joyce Craig is concerned that we're drawing people like a magnet, but that caused a little higher number in Manchester than the rest of New Hampshire. So for all those reasons, we did become the worst. We have improved, and but we want to. We're asking ourselves, we want to do much better. We don't want to just improve a little bit. We want to solve this problem. So we're looking into that. How are we going to do that? So we're completing our first mission of getting ourselves all connected, but we want to take it to the next level.
So if you had, because I noticed Jean Shaheen has new commercials, and she takes credit herself for, fighting hard for the opioid crisis. And I was thinking, in terms of Donald Trump building that wall, but I don't know how much drugs exactly are coming in from Mexico and South America. You're saying in Canada, I have no clue how much drugs are coming in from Canada. I never thought of that. But is there anything like if you could work with like federal like senators, U.S. congressmen, or state congressmen, state governors, what you would like to see proposed, like in the not too distant future, to even cut down on opioid crisis even more?
I mean, the one thing I would say, Joe, is from the beginning, we've been amazed at how much collaboration we've had across the aisle. That both
Democrats and Republicans
Democrats are all together on this. And so we have been so pleased that there's been so much collaboration. There hasn't been that issue. Everybody wants to help.
Yeah.
So we find there's been a consistency of all of them working together. But you because of your experience in Florida, know about how they were among the first for the government to come up with a plan that helps through the prison. So you have a better answer for that part of the question.
Well, I think, Dick, we bring up, I've been around a long time, and I've never, ever had a government official come to me in any of the things I've been involved in, Chamber of Commerce, United Way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, come to me in any of those positions and say, we need your help. We can't.
No, it's never happened.
So there's a door that's opening. So and Governor Sununu, again, through his administration, is doing a terrific job up here. And I want to talk about the hub and spoke that he's setting up. Well, it was very interesting. Dick and I kind of laughed about this when he did that, because the 10 regions that the Good Samaritan Network is developing throughout the state, if you overlap it to what the government's doing, the hub and the spoke, we're married together, aren't we, Dick? It's a God thing. And what's happening is now on those, we have Christians that are aware, again, of what ministries we have out here. As Dick mentioned, we found 58 Christian-based ministries. So, and we're collaborating with the government. We're collaborating with the secular. And we're in one accord. We know that Jesus heals. Now, I'm going to share a specific with you that comes from the state of Florida. You know, when I first came up here, I have to share with you, Frank, one of the first meetings, I mentioned Florida. And several of the people up here in New Hampshire were whispering and says, who does he think he is? We don't want to know about Florida. We're up here in New Hampshire now. Well, the point of it is Florida was doing some things that New Hampshire hasn't done, or very few of the other states. Here's what the state of Florida found out. I mentioned earlier that the family integrity training, which is part of the Good Samaritan Network, as a ministry, teaches these life skills. So the state of Florida allowed us to go in to teach our life skills, to be part of the 100-hour that I mentioned to you that the inmates had to have before they graduated. What they found out, they came to the chaplain and said, what we're finding out is the inmates that are taking this program, we're not having any problem with them. Now, what they further found out, the state of Florida did a study. The recidivism rate after 3 years of an inmate coming back without faith-based classes, if you will, or life skills, the recidivism rate was 70%. Those that had the faith-based program, the recidivism rate after 3 years was 30%.
Yeah.
You know, hello. So they were able to see that, and also that program is also part of in the jail system, like you just said. Instead of, that's what the judicial court was about. Instead of sending a person to jail, if they can take this program, and they have to be faithful, they have to graduate, and they get a certificate, and they present that to the judge, and that gets taken off of their record. That's what we want to bring up here when we're talking about having the state government. That's what we're putting in place, all of these ministries, and the doors are opening. And Dick, I think you can add into that some of the other things that we're doing up here that, again, Governor Sununu's administration, and again, the mayor in Manchester, the doors are opening for the government to bring the faith-based involved. And the most exciting thing is they're taking away the chains that have been put on us, that separation of church and state. The Good Samaritan Network is about healing the body. It's about compassion and time in healing the body. Those people will find out about Jesus from us through the love that we show in our compassion.
Yeah, so New Hampshire is getting involved in so many ways in responding, similar to Florida, like we have drug courts all over the state. But recently I reconnected with the judge in Nashua, actually. Judge Jackie Colburn is actually a friend of mine from college. I was close friends with her husband. And they have a program there where they go through a graduation, and, you know, so she's interested, and all of them are interested in inviting a faith dimension to their efforts. You know, so we just continue to find that. Now, that's just one area. We want to collaborate more with the government, but we've identified 10 ways that we want to get connected in 2020. You know, for example, the governor's doorway, we need to register in. And then Health and Human Services connects all the resources of the community. Those are both government related. The prevention education, you know, so there's so many ways here. Mental health and wellness resources, helping first responders, family support. So there's all these different things happening in our regions that we want to have the Good Samaritan Network and get connected to these 10 ways of helping.
Okay. Okay, moving right along. We're doing excellent on time, by the way.
Good.
Okay, your the website mentions about the Good Samaritan parable in Luke 10. It kind of relates to your organization. How does the Good Samaritan parable in Luke 10 relate to the Good Samaritan Network, your organization?
Well, that's another God thing. You know, when we first started talking about this ministry and gathering all this information, we were drawn to the parable of the Good Samaritan Network, or the Good Samaritan, and that's in Luke chapter 10. It starts in verse 25, and what Jesus was trying to to show his point of the love that we needed to have. So there was a lawyer there, he's teaching in the synagogue, I'm sure, and the lawyer asked a question that, well, how do I get to heaven? What do I need to do? And Jesus simply asked him, well, what does the word say? What does Moses say? What's written down? Well, love your Father God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength, and all your mind, and and the second one is equal to that, love your neighbor as yourself. So then the lawyer, wanting to justify himself, said, well, who is my neighbor? Now, this is the interesting part of the parable. Jesus told a story about a man that was on the road between Jerusalem and Jericho, that he was beaten up and left for dead. And he's laying there. And he tells the story, a certain rabbi went by. He observed the man and he walked past. Now, you have to know, why would the rabbi walk past? See, he had a reason of the law. He wasn't supposed to touch anything unclean, because he would have to go and go through the ritual again. So he didn't help the man. Then came a Levite who took care of the synagogues on an everyday basis, and other Jewish folks. He saw the man and he walked by, because again, he would be unclean because that was the position he had. Now comes a Samaritan. Now what you need to know, back in those days, the Samaritans were frowned upon by the Jews. They just didn't have anything to do with each other. So here's this man that also had the right to walk away, but he didn't. Jesus said that he showed compassion. So he went to the man and he started ministering to this person, in spite of the fact that the thieves may be around and may rob and kill him. He had compassion. He spent time. He treated him, bandaged his wounds. Then Jesus says he put him on his donkey and he went to an inn. And he stayed with the man overnight. And the next day, he left monies that in case the man needed to have more things done. And he told him that I'll be back. So Jesus spoke about three components. He talked about compassion, time, and money. Now, he simply asked the person that asked the question, he says, well, who was the neighbor, the good neighbor? And he said, well, the Samaritan. So that's what the Good Samaritan is all about. We're about having compassion for our fellow man, all of our neighbors, crossing every boundary, crossing every culture. That's what Jesus was talking about. Because you can imagine the conversation, Frank, and there was going, a Samaritan, how could, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's Jesus's point. So that's us. So God put that on us, our heart, that ought to be our network, that we're to heal the body, and we're crossing every boundary, everything, just to heal that person. That's our heart. And that's the Good Samaritan network. Dick, did I leave anything out?
Well, no, you hit it, that we're crossing every barrier. We're making ourselves uncomfortable. We're going out of, our usual place to help the people we're not used to working with. So we're supposed to work with the government. A lot of times the church can't get along. So by the Good Samaritan, we've got to all come together. And it's not about us, it's about helping those in crisis. So we're doing our best,
Yes,
as Jesus commended him for, even though he was, someone that had a big separation from their religion and their ethnic group.
yes.
So we need a lot of that today, Frank.
Okay. Okay, so moving right along, I guess I'll specify this question to Joe, since on your website, you're on specifically on a video talking about your dad. I guess you called your dad a weekend alcoholic, and your son, well, you mentioned here earlier today that it went through the teen challenge and had a relapse and had to go through it again and stuff like that.
Well, the program, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I was the thing that when you were talking about that, from my experience in like Christianity, is a devil spirit known as the generational curse. That if a person has an uncle, grandfather that was an alcoholic, they're probably going to have alcoholism too, along with their kids and grandchildren. And I was wondering what you thought about that. If you have any views on that, or if you ever heard that as a Christian, the generational curse that the alcohol would.
Well, I would not necessarily alcohol, but yes, in the Bible, certainly in the Old Testament, it talks about generational curse from the standpoint that the sins of the father shall be upon the children.
Okay.
And we'll get it in the Old Testament, in Exodus. Well, the point of it is, and we could bring that forward, is that there were there were folks that were not ever going to get into the promised land because they fell away from following what God wanted them to do. And think about this. I mentioned to you earlier, and I've said this before many years. Do you ever have to teach the child to steal a cookie?
No.
And it's no. Because it sets within us. Now a child, and I'll bring it forward into my family, alcohol was always around in my family when we were growing up. So there isn't any curse there. It's there. In other words, it's part of what normalcy is in my particular family. So I was sharing with you earlier, before we came on, that when we got together during the holidays, the adults would drink and the children, they would say, would you go and get dad a beer? Well, part of the reward for getting the beer was to have a sip of it. So obviously that then became the norm. So, and that's what I'm talking about, the curses of those weaknesses that we have in our life. Now we're talking about maybe alcohol, but it could be drugs, it could be anger, it could be, you hear that all the time. Well, my dad or my mother did this to me, therefore I'm doing it to my children.
If they beat women,
Yes,
that passes on the
happened
generation.
to me, and then that happens on to their children. So where God comes in and where Jesus comes in is that we turn away from that, our inequities, that when we come to him, we know that he is the answer. He's the one that loves us. And that's what we have to show first, that love. Now, I'll share something that we were talking also earlier. There's too high a percentage of us caregivers that enable the ones that have these weaknesses. My son, Tim, for example, when he had an alcohol problem, and when we went and were interviewed at Teen Challenge, I'll never forget the name of this associate. His name was Charles. And after about an hour being with myself, my son, and my wife, Tony, he looked at me and he said, Joe, he said, do you want Tim to find Jesus? And of course I said, yes. And he looked at me and he said, then get out of the way. He doesn't need to find Jesus. He has you. And that will stay with me all of my life because I was the great enabler. In other words, I knew he had a problem. I just didn't know until that time he needs help that I can't give him. I'm enabling him by not doing the hard love. And so that's kind of where Teen Challenge came in. And Dick has this. The Teen Challenge is another one that has a success rate of 70 to 75 to 80%. And Dick, would you give the specifics of what that means? You shared that with me earlier. Remember, 5 years.
They had 4 independent studies done. And the criteria was you have to complete the 15-month program. After Teen Challenge, you have to stay connected to them and join a church. And those that did that had a phenomenal recovery rate of 70 to 86%. 4 different studies showed, meaning they were sober for 5 years after leaving the program. So that's a phenomenal result. So there's a few conditions for that study, but that nobody has that kind of result. So that's really just excellent.
And here's something that's interesting. When we had our first meeting, Dick, remember when the government called us all together? Well, Teen Challenge was there. They're in the community of Manchester. Well, once they started talking about and that they were there, here was the interesting thing that opened our eyes. More than half the room weren't even aware of the Teen Challenge ministry. And that is what pointed up to us as we, as a body of Christ, when the government came to us and asked that question, we walked in a lack of knowledge. And that's what the Good Samaritan Network, again, is bringing these things together. Teen Challenge is part of the umbrella of the Good Samaritan Network. So ours is a focus for the church to have knowledge, as Dick said earlier, for the church to have knowledge. And what is our congregations made up of? They're made up of people in the world. They're made up of businessmen and housewives and so on and so on and so on. So as we equip the church, we're equipping society and with the heart of a Christian. Does that make sense, Dick?
Yes.
Okay. So one thing I was going to bring up, that's something that's similar but not quite the same, is a woman who's like her aunt's mother, grandmother, so all had mastectomies or double mastectomies, and she had to have one too. It's as if that generational curse in that case went through a cancer cell that was inherited from generation to generation in females.
Well, I think that's a genetic weakness. Like in my family, for example, whether you're a man or a woman, we tend to have a genetic weakness towards heart problems, heart attacks. In other words, that's within the physical body. And I dare say, when God created us, we had a perfect body. We were to live forever, and then Adam and Eve fell, and therefore diseases came and weaknesses came into our temple. Dick, I know you were given an example of that earlier in the day. When we were talking about the genetic, you were sharing with your family, for example, there's a genetic weakness. Each family tends to have that. That's entirely different than making a decision to drink alcohol. Now, I liken it to this. I liked alcohol myself. Now, I wasn't an alcoholic. However, I will say this. 90% of the time I disappointed my family, alcohol was involved. So therefore, perhaps I did have a problem. Right?
Okay.
But you can think about these curses as what are weakness. Like, in other words, you can have a curse like maybe you like to eat and you don't like to exercise. That's not good for your body.
Yeah.
Maybe that you handle stress differently and you get very angry. That hurts the body. Your blood pressure is going to go up. So these are the kinds of things that you can have in-depth discussion on, but certainly we touch all lightly here, right, Dick?
Yeah, I mean, I want to add one thing is that we have had something called adverse childhood experiences. And so there's this movie, this resiliency movie, they've done studies and found that if you have some of these traumatic experiences as a child, it greatly reduces your physical health, your mental health, your relationships, your life expectancy is cut short, and all of those related to trauma in your environment. So some of those things are genetic, but other things are your life experience. If you're exposed to trauma, you are far more likely to have all these troubles, including addiction. So as much of the environment is just as important as your genetic background.
Wow. Okay, moving right along. Now, I asked you guys earlier, is there anything you would like to negotiate with state or federal legislators to maybe make your job easier and make the addiction or opioid crisis lesser in New Hampshire? What about, New Hampshire is still, marijuana is still illegal in New Hampshire, correct?
Yes.
But it's been decriminalized, but yes, it is illegal.
Yeah.
Okay, so would that help if it never became illegal, if it remained an illegal drug?
Would that help? Yes. Let's look at it this way. When God created us, He created in our lungs. What are we supposed to put in our lungs? Air, right? Amen. Nobody's going to argue. You talk to a doctor. All right. So then why would we think by smoking and putting something else in our lungs besides air? Now, when you're talking about marijuana.
All right.
And Dick, I know there's been studies done in Colorado, which was the first to legalize marijuana, and they are having all kinds of problems with different things, ADHD, automobile accidents, so on and so on and so on. So our politicians, in my opinion, have to look at things scientifically and not take the easy way out. Now, regards marijuana, it has been shown that the oil of the marijuana plant has been known to lower blood pressure. It's been known even to slow down certain cancer cells. It's been known to relax you. All of these things, and it's not unhealthy. There isn't any side effect from it. This has all been scientifically proven. So the point of it is, if you have something like that can do it, then why would you do something over here? And ultimately, you're ruining your lungs. Plus, the smoking of it, as Dick knows this, it leaves something it affects your brain patterns. So it's not good.
Yeah,
Okay.
could I quote the former drug czar under President Bush addressed this issue, and I saw it on a 40-second soundbite that he said, number one, it has an addiction rate. I looked it up, it was 9 to 11%. Now, something like cocaine is 30%. That's very addictive, but marijuana has an addictive rate. People get addicted to smoking marijuana. A second thing, it retards brain development. Until a young man is 25 or a young woman is 22, it slows down their brain development. The third thing is, as Joe says, if you smoke it, it's causes cancer. So those are things that are really important. And now the studies of, again, as Joe has said, in Colorado and other places, the high unemployment rates of those who've been smoking and the problems that they're having in a variety of ways in Colorado, they are regretting that they made that decision. So everybody's getting the statistics and word out, and so many states that haven't legalized it are now have evidence to say we don't want to go down that track. And so our friends in the Good Samaritan Network that are working on prevention are going into schools and saying this is a problematic thing. Stay away from this. And so they're educating our communities. So we would want the government to be open to hearing the research that's coming out so they don't follow that track, because it's not a good outcome.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask too, do you believe this is a gateway drug to like cocaine, heroin, and angel dust? And obviously it probably is.
I tend to think that it is. But I think here's something that's very interesting that they found is the gateway drug is cigarette smoking. There's doctors that have done studies on that, and you'll find in all of these, kind of at the core of all of these is cigarette smoking. And that's kind of the starting point. If you think about it, you start smoking cigarettes, and then cigarettes, and now I'll do the marijuana, and now I'll smoke this, the hair pipe or whatever. But it is a gateway. Anything that it is a gateway.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
But the thing that we want to balance this with is that there's no doubt that it should not be, any further legalization should not happen for it. But on the other hand, Joe pointed out that the oils, they're medically assisted treatment. So there are some medical treatments of it can be used to help people coming off serious drugs. It can be a drug to wean people off. So there's also people who have cancer and a great deal of pain. It relieves their pain. So there are some positive, and other people who sometimes have epilepsy, it stops. So there's good medical uses. So we distinguish between medicinal use and recreational use. It's a very important distinction.
I see. Okay, so listening to you guys, and then when I went on your website, I'm kind of looking at this from like a outsider here. Well, I think that to be a good Christian, you need patience and you need forgiveness. And if you got those two items working for you, that's almost like 90% of being a Christian, I think. But the thing is, I mean, you got like a kid who relapses back into drugs and stuff like that. You say, this kid's just a liar. It's tough to work with him. I don't want to work with him anymore. He's just a liar. I just can't deal with it and stuff like that. But that's probably like 90% of what you all do in the Good Samaritan Network is push like forgiveness and patience, I would assume.
Well, think of the how hard is it to love someone? Love your neighbor, to love. Jesus said, love your Father God, we know, right, as the number one. But the second one, which is equal to the first, some versions say in the Bible, is to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, Jesus in the Word, he asked Peter how many times you forgive, right? In the
7 times 70.
He said 70 times 7.
70 times 7.
Think of that. So who am I? When I came to Jesus, and I asked him to forgive me, he could have said not now. But he forgives every time, all the time, because he loves us. That's our challenge as Christians. That's our challenge to our neighbors, that how many times they fell down. I'm so happy that in my life, of all the many times I fell down, and the times I'm going to fall down in the future, that I have at least one person that'll help me out and forgive me always. And I think that is a challenge, Frank. You hit it. But see, that's the love, the Good Samaritan through Jesus that we're trying to show. Dick, go ahead. I know you're biting to say something.
Okay, yeah.
Well, we have talked to many people who have said one of the number one problems is that people are ashamed.
Yes.
And because they're ashamed, they're not ready to get help. They keep it hidden that they have a problem. So many times the shame that people have prevents families from admitting it, from them getting the help that they need. So we're saying that many times, if you had adverse childhood experiences, it's not your fault that you've come to this place, not necessarily. And so don't be ashamed of that, or don't prevent that. Don't let that stop you from getting help. So we do a lot to say, don't be ashamed, admit you have the problem so you can get the help. And so we try to change the environment so we don't shame people. We say, okay, you've got it. We're all human. We all fall short. So let's get people help. So that's an important part. I fully agree with your other points, forgiveness and patience, but taking away shame is another huge thing of changing our attitudes, that we all fall short. So don't shame anybody if they're struggling in that way.
Let them know that we love them. Kathy Sari has a saying, and I'm sitting here thinking about, she calls them her treasures. Each person is a treasure, our treasure. And that's what we have to show is love. A person already feels ashamed of what they've done. You know how, each of us do, right? How many times do I look in the mirror and have to forgive myself? I feel shame. So we don't need to have someone else beat us up with it. We need to show love and compassion. And I'm pretty sure Kathy and Charlie call it our little treasures, I think.
Yes, they do.
Sure.
Yes, they do.
That's what we need. Each person is a treasure in and of himself.
Yes.
Okay. So moving right along, what is the recidivism? I never can pronounce this word. Your relapse rate, recidivism of the Good Samaritan network. Or do you have a gauge that would measure how good or how bad you guys do in the course of like a calendar year?
So we don't have a recidivism rate ourselves because we are a network that has so many other organizations connected to it. So Teen Challenge has theirs, and Celebrate Recovery has theirs. So we work with all of them. You could say that our measure of success is, we had 58 recovery ministries, we have 108 churches, and as we increase that number, our networking increases. So that is a measure of our networking, but we don't have a way to do that.
Our measurement is those ministries that can see the benefit of partnering with us, that we get the information out of what they're all about so that people are aware of their ministry. That's how we get measured, I would say, the Good Samaritan Network.
But like I mentioned earlier, and I'm just throwing this out here for because it just seems like common sense that the COVID-19, since like March or April, you guys must have seen addictions in New Hampshire go through the roof in drugs and alcohol. So I don't know if that would be a reflection on you guys as far as, the COVID-19 spiking up addictions. That wouldn't be like a failure for you guys, but...
No, that wouldn't be. It wouldn't be a failure. A failure of. It wouldn't be a failure of any ministry. It would be the weaknesses of folks not maybe being able to reach out to the degree that they can, or perhaps we didn't have the right tool. Like we were saying in our churches, the Zoom meetings that we're having now. I know that we can still get together one-on-one. A lot of the ministries are doing that right now. So I would not look at it that any ministry has failed because of the COVID virus.
Never, never, never give up. Isn't that what?
Exactly. Amen. Amen.
That we said in World War II. So it's, even though we're under the COVID, then the only failure would be to stop doing what's needed. So we had to find ways of doing it to help people. So don't stop helping them. That would be what we cannot do.
Wow. So time flies when you're having fun, eh? My producer just informed me we got, a little bit less than 4 minutes left till the end of this episode. Is there anything that we've talked about which you'd like to elaborate on, or something we have not brought up which you'd like to bring up at this point? Quickly.
Well, I would like to just say one thing. As the government reaches out to faith-based ministries, we would only ask that you set the same criteria for us as you do for the secular. In other words, don't release the chains, release those, and give us the same opportunity, the same criteria, so that we can reach out to our fellow man. though the folks that we help will find out about Jesus through the love that we're showing them. We don't have to mention Jesus' name. So that I would say that's what we're looking for.
I would say that I would want to say, practically speaking, you've heard us talk about this. What can you do? And so I would say the number one thing that we have to offer is we have on our Good Samaritan Network website, we have all these recovery ministries that we have listed by 10 regions. So you can look at Nashua, Concord, Manchester, and you can see what's in your region. So you can become aware of where there's help. That's one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that you can invite your church to respond to this. We're helping churches, and the way we do that is, one, we say to churches, we have flyers that we help churches understand what's needed. And we say to churches, one, you need to come up with a plan. Two, you need to share the plan with your church. Three, you need to appoint a recovery coordinator in your church. That person gets trained and connected to all the resources of the community. And as a result of that, number four, your whole church can become helpful. So we call that the Paul Revere strategy. Paul Revere could have fought in Boston, maybe given his life, but he went to Concord and Lexington and got hundreds of people out to fight the British, So we call it, imagine you can get, hundreds, thousands. We want to get tens of thousands of people involved from the church because we have Jesus. We know what Jesus has done for us. So I want to invite everyone to say, here's how you can respond. You can learn about the resources and your church can become activated, and we can put thousands, tens of thousands of boots on the ground all over New Hampshire so that we can not just get the church in the picture, we can change things. Things can get better.
Very quickly, I think we talked about this before off camera, that is there any other states in the United States that have a Good Samaritan network, sort of like the one we have here in New Hampshire?
So we have not heard of any, but we have heard of states asking us for help.
Oh.
In New England, they've asked us, Maine in particular, Pennsylvania. So we have not heard of a statewide networking of the churches, but so we're very willing to share that with others. But no, we haven't, have we, Joe?
Wow. So anyway, I hate to eat, drink, and run, but we must. I was just told we should kind of wrap this thing up. But if you've been blessed, ladies and gentlemen, with the Good Samaritan Network, please go on their website. And it's an excellent website. A lot of good information. And I'll have to have you guys on maybe in a year or so, just to find out what's new, what's going on, and what's new and exciting.
We appreciate you having us on.
Thank you.
Excellent. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, please be sure to join us again for another episode of Frankly Speaking. Thank you very much.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.